How you doing, Watson?
Better. It's funny. At the beginning of this week, I knew that I was going to have a loosing of the bond to Capricorn on level 4 on my fortune spirit, my fortunes that I'm releasing, and I kind of know from experience that like past versions of this releasing like haven't always been great. But like the day came and I seemed to be feeling fine, and then like very very rapidly um
Unraveled.
yeah, kind of got taken out by this sort of fast acting illness that affected my kids, and then I got it, so it got through sort of fevers and kind of a shortness of breath, but seemed
Oh
to
dear.
have recovered fairly quickly, and so luckily it was just a minor level losing
Good.
the bond to Capricorn. Not the worst one I could have, but just my own history sort of shows that those ones tend to be kind of rougher. How about you? How are you doing with your
Well, definitely
teeth?
better. Better. Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, there was the cracked tooth, and I've been to the dentist. I don't have an infection. I'm getting it repaired, and so that's a relief. And then, of course, I had my Wi-Fi issues, which required 2 weeks of phone calls and two different visits by technicians to finally really resolve. Although it is resolved, it seems. Um, so yeah, just like a really like Mercury retrograde. I'm in a Pisces perfection year, so it really is so the fact that Saturn's transiting through Pisces, I think, makes
Hmm.
things less pleasant than they could be.
Right.
And but anything happening in Virgo, the axis is always in place, like
Right.
you've got one perfected sign, but you got to look at stuff happening in the opposite place because that still has a huge impact.
Sure. Yeah, my Mercury retrograde was all about it's still kind of a little bit ongoing, but as Mercury is resuming direct motion, I've been able to kind of finally resolve some things I've been working on through the retrograde. So like very recently, I
Mm.
finally released my first Chrome extension,
Ah,
Astroglyph, which is very appropriate.
congratulations.
Oh, thank you. Which is very appropriately Mercury and Virgo, right? It's just a little Chrome extension that allows you to easily input astrological symbols wherever you want. I posted a video on how to use it on my YouTube page. You can also find it on the Chrome web store if you just type in Astroglyph. Then you can see it there. I'm only charging $5 for it because it's the first thing I ever made. It's a really simple thing, but it's useful if you want to use astrological symbols, but you don't want to have to go back and like copy paste. And so I finally was able to release that, and so that I felt like that was a good kind of Mercury project sort of out of the
Hmm.
way. And I'm kind of curious to sort of keep exploring, what other things I can make with for rather through Chrome extensions and other programs. And of course, I was able to do that with the help of AI. This is what I've done with it. Is to make little tools to make things sort of easier. And so I have a lot of ideas, but don't
Was it
have the.
was it Chat GPT or was it something
It
else?
was it was ChatGPT. I
Okay.
It took a while to. I had, not being a coder and sort of having a very, very rudimentary understanding of what I was actually doing. It took a while to get it to do what I wanted to do, but it was able to create a functional program, and I even had a coder look through the program just to actually just make sure there wasn't anything horrendous in it. But he said it did a possible job of doing what was needed to be done. So he didn't think there was anything, totally egregious about it. So this is really a new era we're in where like,
Right.
non-coders like me can like make something like that. And I wouldn't have known where to start, if I
Right.
didn't have that tool.
Right. Yeah, it's a new world. It's a new world. We were just talking the other day with our good friend Chris about using chat GPT and for some other projects and just sort of considering what is or is not possible, or even if something isn't possible now, will it be possible a few months from now? So yeah, that's really exciting, and congratulations for
Oh,
releasing the
yeah.
extension.
Thanks. Yeah.
That's
Uh,
certainly handy. I can think of many times in my life where I needed exactly that tool. So you'll be
right.
you'll be getting a $5 purchase from me.
Thanks.
For sure,
Appreciate
for
it.
sure, for sure. The least I can do is
So,
throw you $5 for your hard work.
well, I hope I don't. Well, yeah, all the hard work that I made ChatGPT do, we're
Well, it's
obviously
still
gonna have to
you. It's still
rethink
you.
the kind of labor that it is. But I think this is interesting because it's taking away the kind of roadblocks of it's just changing where labor goes.
Right.
We're
Right.
we're going to be becoming AI managers as opposed to doing the thing
Doing the thing
itself.
that we do.
Yeah.
No, I mean, it's brill. It's absolutely brilliant. The thing that amuses me about ChatGPT coming from Montreal is, do you know about this? Do you know
Well, I imagine something about cats.
well, it's funnier than that. Okay, GPT, if you say those letters in French,
GPT.
GPT, which means I farted. So whenever French-speaking people want to use Chat GPT, they have to say, "Cat, I farted. How do I how do I code this?" Or "Cat, I farted. How do I blah blah blah?" So that's kind of funny. It's, and there's kind of who knows
Yeah.
where that goes, but it's amusing.
Yeah.
Now, speaking of Mercury retrogrades and sort of revisiting work and things that need correction, updating, things of this nature. So you're on the chopping block this week, Patrick. Or you've placed yourself there, I should say. I'm not putting you there, but you've this is what we have to do as sort of honest brokers in astrology, is be as upfront about our wrong calls as we are about
Yeah.
our successes.
Absolutely. And I'd previously publicized my speculation about what Elon Musk's rising sign might be. And I think that my approach to that, I think I followed a pretty rigorous process to do that. And I think I did it in, I guess, a valid way.
Mhm.
But ultimately, we finally did get confirmation on Elon Musk's rising sign and on his birth time, from a new biography that's been published by
Walter Isaacson.
Walter Isaacson.
Yeah.
And
And
yeah, I got it wrong. I got it pretty thoroughly wrong. So it's yeah, so I just want to be completely upfront about that and take, obviously
yeah.
full responsibility for that. I think what's there's and I think naturally there's the tendency to go, how did this happen? And I can show you
Yeah.
some of the things that led me to think, and I actually discussed this with Chris Brennan
Mhm.
on the Casual Astrology podcast, my sort of whole thought process. And I can very briefly show you some of the things that made me think that he might have been Aquarius rising instead of Cancer rising. But we'll look at it in the context of the Cancer rising chart, obviously, to see, how
Yeah.
it actually worked. But at least you'll see, like, I didn't just bullshit this, oh, my cat's there.
Yeah, I can see your cat.
That's Daisy.
Cat, I farted.
Don't fart on my cat, Nick.
Chat GPT. Before we go into this, it is really interesting. I just want to say that I've been paying virtually zero attention to Musk. Like, I mean, I'm on Twitter, and which I'm still going to call Twitter.
Yeah, me
And
too.
so obviously I see him there, and I'm a regular consumer of news, and he's often popping up there. So I knew the sort of the general public stuff that we know about him. I was vaguely aware that he had kids, but I hadn't realized until last night. You, Chris, and I were talking about this rectification that you'd done, and the revelation of the new birth time. And I hadn't realized, like, that he has triplets and twins. And of course, the thing that would have been obvious to me if I ever had looked at him, which you definitely took into account when you did this rectification, was how many of his kids. First of all, most of his kids are born during red intervals, during
Right.
close to Venus retrogrades, with a couple of interesting exceptions, or one interesting exception that I know of. There might be another because I haven't looked at all of them.
If we
But
even know about all of them.
right, if we even know about it, good point. But three of them, the twins born in 2004, and then a recent child born in 2020, all born with in the Venus retrograde in Gemini period. And as was Musk's mother was born
With Venus in Gemini.
April
Yeah.
19th, 1948, and she's a red 3 interval, like
Yeah.
3 of her grandchildren.
And
So I mean,
he himself has Venus in Gemini almost at
right,
that degree, I believe.
he
So there's
does,
a
but
clear
not
Venus,
not
right?
retrograde, but in that degree,
So
it is
yeah, I mean,
astounding. Yeah.
I mean, I can sort of show a little bit of what my thought process was, just to kind of take it back to. I imagine we might be getting a little ahead of ourselves, but just to maybe give a visual aid might be helpful.
Yeah,
As we're
please go
talking
ahead.
about this.
Go
So I
ahead.
will
Yeah.
share my screen so we can kind of really show people what I was looking at. This isn't what the entire show is going to be about, obviously, about why my rectification was wrong, but I do think that you'll be able to see, like, it's not like I was totally, pulling it out of my ass. So Elon Musk's first child was a child called Nevada Musk, and Nevada Musk very tragically died just a couple weeks after
10 days.
they
10
were
days.
not alive for very long. And so what's interesting about this is you can see that the child was born when Venus was in Gemini. So this is pretty close to Venus return for Elon Musk. Not only that, but there also would have been an eclipse that occurred in Gemini. This is in the midst of his Saturn return in Gemini, Mercury retrograde in Gemini. So this was the first inkling I had that perhaps Gemini could be in the 5th house of his chart, because an interpretation you could potentially make about having a Saturn return in the 5th house would be like difficult or challenging situations involving children. And if he was Aquarius rising, then he would have been a night chart. So Saturn would have had an especially sort of malefic character. So that was kind of point number one. Like, okay, so we have this massive concentration of planets in Gemini, and he has a child. And then in 2004, as you mentioned, there were the twins who were born, and they were born during a Venus-Mars conjunction in Gemini. And this, as you mentioned, was also in the red 3 interval. This is right basically as Venus is about to station retrograde in Gemini. And the other Venus retrograde in Gemini child that kind of alerted me to this pattern in Elon Musk's life was the birth of X, which happened May 4th, 2020.
The person, not the website.
Right. Yeah, the person, not the way. This is the XAE12 Musk kid with the interesting name. So they were born right before Venus station retrograde in Gemini. And this is also in the lead up to, the movement of the nodes into Gemini. So there was some commonalities between all of the times that the Musk children entered the world that seem to implicate Gemini as being the sign most relating to the topic of children. But as we know, now that we have the this birth time, we can see that is actually not the case, and that those transits in Gemini must simply have been important for the fact that his Venus was there and that his Saturn was there, but not necessarily that it related to the 5th house. Interestingly, though, I sort of got my benefics and malefics sort of switched up in my rectification, because I assumed that because he has a lot of children, but also had a couple of really unfortunate incidents with children, that you'd have to have a malefic and a benefic kind of interacting with the 5th house of children in his chart. And if we look at his chart as it is, with this quote of 7:30 a.m., then we can see that Jupiter, the most positive planet, would be in the 5th house of children, which would definitely speak to the fact that he has had a lot of children. But the ruler of the 5th house is Mars in the 8th, about to station retrograde. And so he did experience the loss of a child, and the 8th is the place of death. So it's really frustrating to see this kind of perfect sort of redundancy or overlap between these two possibilities. I just didn't consider it I didn't consider this as strongly, because I was focusing so much on those recurring Venus events in Gemini that made me think that could be the fifth house. So that was kind of the reason
Hmm.
I didn't consider Cancer, because
Right.
I was so focused on the patterns of planets and transits in Gemini and the topic of children in this chart that it just made me think that that could be the only way that could make sense. Um, so there are some other things as well. Uh, Elon Musk reported that he got malaria when he was 29 years old. He got a really bad case of malaria, and he almost died. He lost like
Hmm.
tons of weight and was just skeletal. And this is right before he decides he wants to start going into space and wants to found SpaceX. So this is all kind of part of his Saturn return story. But I thought that the solar eclipse in Cancer would have occurred in his sixth house, describing an illness. And he would have been in a sixth house perfection year as well at age 29. But with Cancer rising, that solar eclipse would have happened in the first house. So that's something that sometimes trips me up is sometimes a bad transit in the sixth house of illness can be hard to distinguish from a bad transit in the first house, since the first is the house of self and sometimes of
Yeah.
the body. So there's these really frustrating overlaps that can make rectification very, very difficult. And so, obviously, I'm not trying to downplay my mistake, but I, think it's just worth going through. Well, how could Patrick Watson have been led astray? Well, it can happen. When
Yeah.
you
Everyone who's followed your rectification on this has said, look, your reasoning was good. Just it's not the thing we need to remember is rectification, no matter how well done, is always a speculation.
speculation, yeah.
Yeah, it's always theoretical. I offer it as a service, and I put a lot of work into it when I do it, but that's always the bottom line is at best I've offered a chart that really seems to work from top to bottom, and I go through a person's whole life chronology in order to do it. But the principle is it's theoretical, no matter how well done.
Well,
But
and
yeah,
when
no,
you
I mean,
find a pattern like that, it doesn't always point to the house that you think it does.
no, that's
Because the pattern actually still holds up, right? I mean, because this
no,
is
yeah, yeah,
independent of his chart. The
yeah,
transits of Venus retrogrades in Gemini are important for the
that's that
story of his life and his children, but it's just not, the fifth house.
That's precisely why I've always seen a lot of value in using synodic cycles, and I use them to the extent I do, is even if you don't have a time of birth, you have this, precedent that you can follow. And you just know, like, if intervals tend to be a given Venus interval tends to be important in a person's life 2 or 3 times already, okay, moving forward, you just keep a laser focus on that. You may or may not know what time you're born, but if you know that the Venus retrograde in Gemini or something of that nature is consistently, important in the timeline, where a lot of important events or births or deaths or things of like that take place, you've got something, you've got solid astrological information that you really can use, despite the blind spot of not knowing, what time someone's born.
Right. And the Venus in Gemini thing actually goes a lot deeper, as you kind of alluded to. Like Elon Musk's mother, May Musk, has Venus
Hmm.
retrograde in Gemini.
Yeah.
Elon himself has Venus in Gemini. Several of his children have Venus or Venus retrograde in Gemini.
Yeah.
So the Venus retrogrades in Gemini seem to be important both for the emergence of his children, but also for some of his relationships. Sun Venus conjunctions in Gemini have also been really important for the end. Like, for example, I think he met Tallulah Riley, his second wife, during a Sun Venus conjunction in Gemini.
Okay.
There's also an unconfirmed report that his first contact with Amber Heard was during a Venus retrograde in Gemini.
Oh, I didn't even know. See,
On a
the only reason I know who she is because of the whole Johnny Depp thing, and that's
I
another thing.
Yeah, well, that's
I don't
another big Gemini story as
right.
well.
Right. And I don't pay enough attention to these stories. Like, I see them in the news, and Johnny Depp is someone whose chart I've studied to some extent, but I always try not to get wrapped up in these scandals while they're happening.
Right.
I'd rather study these things when the bodies are cold, so to speak. It's and there's a few good reasons for it. But yeah, all that being said, I had no idea he was with Amber Heard.
Briefly, yeah, there was some interaction between them, and so it's interesting that that pattern still kind of holds up, even if
Sure.
it didn't necessarily
And
implicate the
and and
house.
and Elon and Johnny Depp are born 8 years apart to the
Yeah,
month.
you
Like
got it.
they're both in the
Nicely spotted.
yeah, they're both in the white one interval that precedes the blue five of that we had in the summers of 63 and 71. So yeah, so
Yeah,
maybe
I've probably paid more attention to the comings and goings of Elon Musk's Venus activities more than and the reason why is because, well, it happened as a result of trying to follow up on the Venus retrograde connection I noticed with the 2004 and 2020 children that came from the Venus retrogrades of those years.
right.
And so then I decided to kind of focus more on the events that we knew from his personal life to kind of rectify
Yeah.
his time. I focused a little less actually on the business parts of his career. Maybe that was a mistake as well, but
Not well, only because you turned out to be wrong. But in
right.
terms of like a conscious strategy, I think that's, there's a lot to be said for that. Yeah, I think you just came up against a
Yeah.
really tricky example, and you did your
Well, and
best.
I also didn't. I did try to get the birth time before. I only ever tried to rectify it out of kind of desperation. I reached out directly to May Musk. I tried to get through to her agents. I tried to do it very
Mhm,
nicely. I tried to show that I had done some research already on it. I'd read her biography. I'd
mhm,
read a couple of Elon Musk biographies, the one by Ashley Vance and
yeah.
the other one. So I had tried to do this. Then I even reached out
Yeah.
to Justine Musk just in case she knew. But I was ignored. I can't imagine why.
What
You know.
I'm interested. I've seen these pictures of Justine just this morning. I started looking at Elon and getting a sense of his history. And I gotta say, like, I'm not an Elon fanboy, but every picture I see of Justine Musk just sends some kind of weird shiver down my spine. I don't know. I'm not usually so judgmental of people on such a superficial basis, but every picture of her I see makes me think like, holy moly, who is uh, this person? Anyway, do you know her birthday? Do we know it? I'm gonna have to.
Justine Musk.
Yeah.
Oh, one. Yeah, we do. It's around here somewhere. Let me see if I have it
Okay.
in
I haven't
my
gotten
little
around to her.
database.
I'm sure it must be there, but I just haven't gotten around to her
So
yet.
Justine Musk was born September 2nd, 1972. So
Oh, okay. So
one
she's
thing
just
this
coming out of the red 3. She's just a
so
little bit after the red 3.
so
She's
one
isn't
thing
quite
that
2.
I think you'll probably think is quite interesting about Justine Musk is if we take Justine Musk's birth date. We obviously don't have the time.
Sure.
Then we take the time that Nevada Musk died, her first child died. We can
Mhm.
see that happened, almost exactly, at her Saturn
Saturn
return.
return, yeah.
So it's possible that maybe Justine Musk was the Aquarius rising in this situation.
Mm,
It's it's these kinds of things that again kind of led me to think like, okay, well, Saturn's operating in this part of the life, somehow, but
right.
just couldn't figure out exactly how. But so it wasn't just a part of Elon Musk's Saturn return, but it's an even closer hit, for Justine. Obviously, that's got to be one of the most
Right. I saw that they
traumatizing
they
things
they they wound up arguing
you
over
experience.
whose arms the baby actually died in. That was,
Right.
that's quite a visceral argument to have.
Um. Yeah, I don't know. I don't think I had quite the same impression of Justine Musk that you did.
Oh,
I read
I'm just looking at these
her
pictures.
letter and
Okay.
her article, and I think if anything, I feel like she was able to dodge a bullet in some ways
Okay. Well, I
by
mean, I imagine
not
that's
being
true.
with
And look,
Elon.
and look, no
I
matter what.
sympathized with her after kind of reading her
Yeah.
her take on things. But
I mean, look, anyone who loses a child that way has my sympathy,
oh, for
even if
sure.
I'm otherwise not, well disposed
Right.
towards them.
I
So
mean,
I didn't
hell,
mean
I even have
to.
sympathy for Elon,
Well, of
through
course, no, no,
that. I
and
mean,
that,
just on a human level, I think it's a
no, no,
horrible
of
thing to
course, yeah, yeah,
experience.
no, no, no.
You know,
That's yeah, that goes without question.
yeah.
I always respect that someone's gone through that. I was just very recently reading a biography of the publisher of Time magazine, Henry Luce, and his wife, his second wife, Claire Booth Luce, who's kind of this notorious figure. She was a writer. She wound up being a senator and an ambassador later. She's sort of a not a very sort of warm figure. She's sort of an early social climber kind of person. But her only child died tragically, not as an infant, as a young woman, but in the middle of all this sort of biographical stuff that had me sort of not so well disposed, where as soon as you see a human being losing their child, I mean, that's just universally
Sure.
awful.
Right. So what are some other things that we could say about Elon Musk's chart now that
Well,
we actually
yeah,
have?
yeah. Well, I wanted to say one other thing that I'm
Oh,
just going through that's a bit
yeah.
strange. Nevada Musk, the infant who died at 10 days, was born in May 2002, May 18th, 2002, which makes them a black 3 interval. And
Venus-wise, right.
right,
Yeah.
in the Venus cycle. Elon's father, Errol Musk, was born May 25th, 1946, and is also a black 3 Venus interval. But there's something even stranger about this in terms of where I fit in with this. I learned Elon and I have something in common.
Uh-oh.
We both have a parent born on May 25th, 1946, because that is the day my mother was born. Now, I don't know what
That's
time.
not a compliment to your mom.
Well, this is the thing. This is the second time this happens, but I don't know if you remember. I think I've mentioned this on the live stream before. My dad, my adopted dad, was born about an hour and a half before Donald Trump.
Oh my God.
Right.
Okay.
So
all right. Wow.
But I cannot tell you, like, there are no two people different than Errol Musk and Donald Trump. And I don't even mean this like morally. I mean, yes, my parents are good, sort of, good people, but just like, I mean, if anything, if I was ever to like sort of fault my parents, on anything, it's their utter lack of capitalistic instinct. Like it's like we can say, I'm not a big fan of capitalism, but they are so delinquent in that just sort of basic instinct to they're really they're as uncapitalistic as these other two guys are, to the point where it's actually kind of a problem and not merely a virtue.
Interesting.
So it is. My dad is a Cancer rising as opposed to Trump's Leo rising. That just changes everything. You can't.
Well, it makes him the eclipsed moon instead of the sun triumphing over the moon.
Exactly. And that's him in a nutshell. I mean, he's an economist who could never be good at with the economy. I mean, he's got loads of. I mean, he's a beautiful human being, but
the barber with a bad haircut.
That kind of there's an element to that, and my mother would never have the instinct to be a property developer in a mine company, like
a pilot.
No, there's just none of that in her whatsoever.
Right.
I don't know what time Errol Musk is born. My mother's very likely in Aquarius rising with a Pisces moon. Very sort of, funny enough, I've never tried to rectify her chart. But long story short, I'm just like, what the hell is going on with these, these terrible people and how they're born so close to my parents. But this is a very good astrological lesson for me, obviously.
For sure.
And that's the only reason I'm sharing it here, is not to sort of put myself in the middle of the story. But, speaking of rectification, speaking of working with astrology, it's important to remember that, there's probably hundreds of thousands of really good, decent people born on June 14th, 1946, or May 25th, 1946, who are not DT or Errol
Earl
Musk.
Musk.
Anyway, rant
Yeah,
over. Let's move ahead. I felt that needed to be said on my part.
sure. So one thing that I thought was really interesting looking at Elon Musk's chart here is, one way you can immediately access a chart is just by looking at the position of the ruler of the ascendant. And so when we do that for Elon Musk, we can see that he was born with Cancer rising. So that makes the moon the ruler of the ascendant, and that puts it in the third house. What's additionally interesting about this placement is the fact that the ruler of the third is also in the first, rising. So there's a mutual reception actually between the rulers of the first and third, which would sort of elevate the importance of those two topics together. So what's really interesting to me about that is the third house. We say the third house is the house of short trips and
Mhm.
transportation and travel and siblings and relatives. And so what's so interesting about that is, think about the companies this guy has made. Tesla, car company. It's about
Mhm.
moving you along. He wants to put AI in cars. He wants to have self-driving cars, and he wants to get people up to the moon and to Mars. And this guy's whole sort of raison d'etre, seems to
Sure.
be about using technology and interfacing technology with our bodies, which is I think the kind of lunar connection potentially to Mercury and Cancer.
Mhm.
We also know that he started his first company with his brother, Zip2, which is sort of like a precursor to like MapQuest and Google Maps.
Mhm.
And he also bought Solar City, this company founded by his cousins. So it's I mean, obviously we don't see necessarily all of the private details that sort of go into this, but at least from what we can tell from the outside in, that the topic of siblings and relatives, third house figures in his life, as well as the third house topics of travel and transportation, do seem to be, pretty important. There seems to be an area where he, could have a major impact. And that is kind of well reflected by the fact that he has Cancer rising. Um, this reminds me a bit of Walt Disney, who was born with the ruler of the first in the third.
Mhm.
And Walt Disney was obsessed with cars and trains and rides. That's why we got Disneyland, right? It comes from his obsession with cars. And you might also remember that Walt Disney, his business manager, the his main business partner was his brother, Roy
Yeah.
Disney.
Yeah, Roy
So,
Disney.
so I that kind of came to mind as I was looking at this sort of third house emphasis, as suggested by the ruler of the ascendant in Elon Musk chart, that it kind of reminded me of how those same sort of topics of the third house of mobility,
Mhm.
transportation, and siblings was similar in his life as it was to Walt Disney. What do you think of this? Do you have any thoughts on the ruler of the ascendant or the planets in this first house?
No, I mean, on those grounds, I think you're spot on. Um, I think it's also interesting that the sun moon being in a sextile, the moon receiving a sextile from the sun.
Mm,
I think winds up sort of like on top of the mutual reception, which sort of speaks for itself. Um, the application that a moon receives, I think, is another sort of telling indicator. And this is you get more of your sort of your solar types here.
well, it also
Despite
makes sense,
being
right? He's a science guy, right? He's an engineer. He's a,
yeah.
he's obviously skilled to some degree with the domains of Mercury and
Mhm.
the mercurial skills you sort of need.
Right.
I'm not saying he's the only one responsible for the things that his companies sell. I'd say this
No.
probably also speaks to his kind of crafty business nature, right? He's he's
Yeah,
not
he's more of I mean, he's been more adept at anything at sort of getting ahead of projects that were, already initiated and technologies that other people were already developing and sort of, syncing them and taking them over and stuff, as opposed to like actually innovating,
right.
out of his own imagination, but more of as a sort of a manager and a curator of technology, not unlike Edison was. I mean, they talk about Edison inventing the light bulb, which is like a short in the shortest hand true, but at the end of the day, he developed it on top of hundreds, if not at least dozens of other people's patents and
See,
building
I
up to
think,
something.
yeah, see, I think that's a better comparison for him rather than like Howard Hughes. Some
Oh,
people try to say
absolutely, yeah.
he's like this generation's Howard Hughes, and I'm like, I don't know about that. I think he's more like the Edison.
Yeah, no, Hughes was a lot more hands-on,
Right.
whatever you want to say about him, like, he's a lot more he is another one of these sort of goofy billionaire, monsters, but yeah, he was a lot more hands-on than I think Musk or Edison.
Now, one thing that does kind of strike me as sort of interesting about this chart is if you asked me if this person would be wealthy, or if you asked me what would I have to
Right.
say about their money, I'm not sure that I would have automatically said that this person's going to be a billionaire. If we look at the second house, which
Mhm.
is the main place we would tend to look for matters of finance, we can see the south node is there, and the south node tends to be a kind of diminishing force
Yeah.
generally. I don't look
Mhm.
at it terribly positively, which would tell us that whatever he has might eventually come down, especially through a major ecliptic type of event, say a solar eclipse. And if we look at however, if we do look at the ruler of the second house, then we can see that it is the sun in the first house,
Mhm.
which would potentially make that topic more pivotal in one's life, because it's close to the angle itself. I also think it's quite interesting as well because his identity is somewhat associated with Dogecoin, a currency. So his identity is actually kind of connected in some ways to the topic of money and finance and these sorts of things, which is interesting because I saw that in a different way when I thought he was Aquarius rising. But there's
Mm.
still, you could still make a sort of similar interpretation that his very identity is somehow connected to the topics of the second house of business and finance. And the sun is the sec light. It is close to its max declination, northern declination. It is the primary trigon lord of the first house of the
Mhm.
second house rather. It is in a trine, I guess, to Jupiter, but I'm not sure that it would really stand out as it would be much harder for me to be able to justify that this guy would have incredible wealth. If anything, I would see like more dangers potentially to what one has, especially because of the fact that his Mars, which I hope you
Mhm.
talk about soon,
Mhm.
because there's some things to say about that Mars.
There are, yeah.
That's in the eighth house, which would potentially show danger from like debtors or danger from the problems of debt and loans and shared resources. And so I think that shows up in a really interesting way, as we'll get to hopefully. So what do you have to say about
Yeah, well, I mean, this is
his money
yeah.
in this
The
chart?
the thing about the Mars is, for people who don't realize, it's on the verge of stationing retrograde. That Mars retrograde in Aquarius of 1971 is very rare. Mars would not go retrograde in Aquarius again until 2018. And in the 20th century, like in 1939, you had Mars went retrograde, I think at like 4 Aquarius and wandered back into Capricorn. And that was just before the Ribbentrop-Molotov Pact and the invasion of Poland and all that. And then prior to 1939, I mean, that's really it for the 20th century for Mars retrogrades in Aquarius. It'll happen once or twice in a century. But Musk is born just before that Mars goes retrograde. And um and so I think that was part of what sort of steered you to putting it on the ascendant, because it's such a distinctive part of the Mars cycle, like really out of the ordinary. Now I'll tell you that the positive impact that Musk has had on my life, and it's actually really important, and I have to acknowledge this, is I've been a working astrologer since the year 2000. But I was working for a British company online with clients, mostly in the UK, but sometimes in Europe and North America. And then eventually from there, I transitioned to being an independent, astrological consultant where clients were paying me directly through my website. But all through that period, My life as I know it would not have been possible without PayPal. And to my knowledge, that's how he, really. I mean, PayPal predates Tesla, doesn't it? I don't know, but you're the
He
expert.
basically,
I
well,
don't
I'm
know.
not an
I don't know.
expert, but I mean, I've read,
You're
you
more
know,
than I am, and yeah, I'm gonna get into him now because I can see like this whole thing with the kids is actually really really interesting.
right.
You know,
One brief thing I'd want to say about PayPal though is he definitely just piggybacked on that. That's definitely how he got paid.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
In
Well, that's
2002, yeah, Jupiter was in Leo and he got
right.
like this massive,
Yeah,
multi-billion-dollar payout for the sale of PayPal to eBay. And that certainly makes sense for getting a massive payday with Jupiter in the second house.
yeah, and I
Um,
mean that changed my life. That allowed me. PayPal changed everything for me, made my life possible. Otherwise, I would have just been, trapped in Montreal. No means to, really make a life for myself or anything.
do you know what he
Yeah.
originally wanted to call PayPal?
X.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
actually, yeah, no,
yeah. I
that's
know.
exactly
Yeah,
correct.
yeah.
He everything he's done, he's wanted to call X. He's had this like obsession with this word that doesn't mean anything. Sort of like he has Mercury on the ascendant, wants to have things around him which are sort of,
Right.
vaguely enigmatic. Even Tesla, wanted to call Tesla X and SpaceX, and he's just had this, yeah, kind of weird obsession with that. But yeah, I also, I similarly have a debt of gratitude to pay for PayPal, which I pay
Yeah.
every with every transaction and fees. But yeah, really,
No, for sure. But
piecemeal was
yeah, no,
probably the one
yeah,
we is probably more responsible on an administrative level for what we
yeah.
know as PayPal and turning it away from what Elon Musk sort of wanted to do. In fact, while Elon Musk was on his honeymoon, the board outed him as the CEO. They ousted him.
Oh,
his
okay.
That happened while Saturn was in his 12th house. So he had this
At
takeover by his enemies basically.
at PayPal.
At PayPal, yeah, yeah.
Okay, okay. Yeah, I don't know much of I just know that's an early part of history, and my
Mhm.
point being with that Mars and North Node in the 8th house, like, yeah, you're talking about him piggybacking and, I mean, he's known to be I mean, there's a lot more piggybacking than innovating on his part,
Right.
I mean, he didn't
He's known for taking the stuff other people have and
exactly.
ruining
So
it.
this is so it's not a it's not a question of him having a strong 2nd house, it's a question
Mhm,
of him having a really powerful 8th house.
mhm,
That's where it comes from. And remember, this is an axis. The second, eighth house
mhm.
axis is, that's the problem with houses. You get the sense that they're just sort of isolated or that they relate to each other only if like the rulers of those houses relate to each other. But no, that axis is critical. And yeah, the eighth house can earn money for a person if the right planets are in the right place. But yeah, Mars with that north node, that's an amplified Mars by virtue of being close to the north node, and it's making a phasis. It's very very close to its
Right.
retrograde station, so
So,
it's a
like
super super
you,
powerful Mars.
right, like you, I see someone who's born in June, July of 1971, and I
Yeah,
automatically go to thinking, okay, well, that's a pretty rare Mars retrograde because of it's happening close to its
the rarest.
aphelion, yeah, one of the
Yeah,
rarest. And we know that there would be a close return of this type of Mars retrograde around 47 years old. So that takes us directly to the summer of 2018
yeah.
as the kind of key time when we would actually see the eventuation of that placement of Mars. And so, did you end up looking up what happened to Elon Musk in the course of this Mars retrograde that happened in August through September of 2018? Because I think
Uh,
it's quite interesting.
Not yet. You and I talked about it a little bit, and you said one of them was, and I did see this was when he was on Joe Rogan and he, smoked weed and the stock and the Tesla stock went down for a day or something like that. I
Yeah,
remember that.
he was definitely not doing very well. Like it seemingly on a mental health dip during this period. But the other major eighth house thing that occurred in September of 2018 is that he was sued by the SEC, right? That's the Securities and Exchange Commission. They were basically charging him with like market manipulation based on his tweets, moving the market with his tweets. He came under fire by the the nation's regulatory agency of securities and commodities, and this one basic interpretation we might have of Mars in the 8th house might be like trouble with the IRS, or trouble with
Mhm.
involving stocks and trading and the resources of others. And there we have it. We have once Mars stationed direct and sort of moving through those signs again, that's when that sort of trouble sort of came about. So it's interesting to see how the house manifestations of that really shut up. Now, for me, I thought that was a first house event. I thought that was all about
Mm.
how this is bringing like negative attention to himself as a sort of martial character, kind of acting, kind of going rogue in a way. But we can see now that this is actually more of an 8th house thing, and this sort of brings in the 8th house connotations of shared resources as kind of evidence through what happened in this lawsuit, from the SEC.
Yeah. Yeah. Very interesting. Very interesting. Yeah, I guess the other thing to say is I noticed he also has, like, we talked about the fact that he's got 3 children born in the red 3 Venus interval, and his mother was born in the Venus red 3 interval, but he's also got triplets and then a 4th child, it seems,
Yeah,
born during the red
so
4 interval.
some of the
So there's a lot of
there's a lot of kids. So what's tricky about the triplets is I cannot find when they were born. There were some
they're
there's
assigned January 1st, 2006, right? I mean,
but that's
it
contradicted by a tweet that he made about
I
one of their
see. Okay.
birthdays. There was like one random website that said they
Okay.
were born August 20th, but then there was another website that seemed to indicate they might have been born at the end of that year. So we don't
Okay.
actually know
I
when
see.
they
I
were
see.
born. But one thing that was interesting is that he had previously had children when the nodes were going through the signs of Gemini and Sagittarius, and in 2006 the nodes were going through the squaring signs, which means that the max north and max south new and full moons of that year would have occurred in Gemini and Sagittarius. So in December of 2006 you would have had a super max, or rather a max north full moon,
Okay.
or a max north new moon rather, occurring in or rather what am I saying, a max south full moon in Gemini at the end of 2006. But yeah, I wasn't able to find the exact dates for that, so that was kind of
Okay.
frustrating, but I still felt I had enough potential evidence to
Yeah.
suggest Gemini
The
as a
the interesting thing about 2006 is that was a year, not unlike 2 months from now. 2006 was a rare time, I think, when you had the Sun and Mars conjunct in Scorpio in November. And since his 5th house is in Scorpio, in the
oh
5th
right, that would have
house,
been a
and
Jupiter.
so for him to have triplets during, like when Sun and Mars are together in Scorpio in November of 2006, I'm just thinking out loud here. Obviously we've already, this the whole theme of today's episode is the dangers of speculation. But yeah,
Right.
as you see, there you are. You've got Sun and Mars in Scorpio over the course, during Scorpio season,
Mhm.
and you can see at some points you had 5 planets there.
Right. So
So
this is really interesting. When, as a Jupiter return in the 5th house, I think becoming a father to triplets is
yeah,
pretty
with all that going
on
on, that's what I'm
point.
thinking, especially with
Yeah.
a rare Sun and Mars, don't come together in Scorpio all that often. It is happening this year in 2023. It happened in 2006. It happened in 1991. It happened in 1976. But it's like every 15 years or so you'll get one, but it's not that common. And when you're working, and incidentally, in this period, and if I'm not mistaken, Musk is 35, which means he's in a 12th house perfection year. So we're also seeing that weird, the fact that the 12th house has something to do with his family and kids. The fact that that these kids would have been born, if they're born after his birthday in 2006, he would
Right.
be
You're
in the
right.
perfection year.
Yeah. I mean, unfortunately, we just don't know when
No, no,
Damon, Saxon,
no.
and Kai were born exactly.
Right, right.
Obviously, it would be great to have birth times as well, but we
Yeah,
don't even have birth dates for those. We just know 2006 is
right,
the year.
right.
Um,
And now
what other?
the other thing about his kids is, it's interesting for a guy who is so fluid with language that he just wants to name everything X being the sort of the de facto, sort of
Unknown.
unknown, right? I mean, even with,
His
questions of say
child.
exactly, well, his child, or say the gender of his children, which seems to be uh, um, now the theory I'm hearing again. I have just the layman's knowledge of Musk,
Mhm.
and I hear the rumors, and I don't know. I'm going to read Isaac's. I have one of the other biographies which I haven't read, but I'm going to get Isaacson's book because I've read everything else Isaacson has written, and he's really thorough. He's really good. Um, so I'm looking forward to that. But as I don't know anything, but what I do know is one of the twins who was born Xavier in 2004, one of the Red Three twins,
Yeah.
is now a trans woman. I
Yeah,
forget the name,
she's
Vera
Vivi.
or something.
She's
Vivian. That's
Vivian.
it. I knew it was a V name, although you still see her dead name on IMDb, for instance, when I was looking up the birthday. Um, but in any case, apparently what I've heard is the whole reason Musk bought Twitter was to sort of counter the sort of blowback he's getting from his own trans child, over his attitudes.
Anti-trans views.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Um,
So I find that there's something, there's an
it's
irony
almost
in this
like
whole thing.
Mars went retrograde in what sign was it at the end of 2022? Like
Right,
it
Gemini.
was
Yeah,
Gemini, right?
yeah,
Yeah. Well, see, and that's another thing that made me think like, oh, okay, so this is like, the war over
sure.
this,
Yeah,
this thing. But again, it's the 12th. So, it's kind of back to the drawing board with recontextualizing these things that I saw as a pattern, but now I have to understand in the proper way,
right. But
with this chart.
even with the faulty chart, knowing that Gemini is the sign that it is, you can see how
Right.
much you could do in terms of like understanding the man's life and path astrologically. Excuse me. Even without knowing the time of birth, knowing that those Venus retrogrades, and yeah, the very rare Mars retrograde in Gemini, that it always seems to be like really, really central in his timeline, especially with regards to his family. And so like you can fuss all you want, whether over what house you think that
Right.
Gemini should be placed in, and it's
Right.
easier to be wrong about that speculation. But the one thing that you're, at the end of the day, you're not wrong. It's just, it's staring you in the face, is the fact that his
Right.
mother and three of his kids were all born in the same
So,
Venus
I mean, in some ways,
retrograde cycle that
right.
his natal Venus is in, and that the Mars retrograde in Gemini last year was also this time of crisis in his family between him and one of his
Yeah.
kids, and that's that, and you can't change those facts. Those facts speak for
So it
themselves.
may just be that, this is part of some larger generational family pattern for this particular family, that like this is transits through Gemini that seem to connect them,
Yeah.
and wouldn't necessarily have to occupy a particular place in his chart in order to still be relevant. I just want to briefly address a couple of the comments we've
Oh,
received
okay.
here.
Yeah, I've been looking at
Um,
the comments.
so number one, so Samantha asked, I think I heard Nick explain before that Mars in Aquarius is a rare Mars placement in general, retrograde or not. How is that so astronomically? I know you've discussed this
Yeah.
before, but very briefly, it's about the aphelion and
Yeah.
perihelion,
Well, I
right?
mean, their question is, why is Mars, aside that they're asking, aside from the retrograde, why is Mars more rare? But it is specifically because of the retrograde, because retrogrades when Mars goes retrograde in a sign, it spends like 6 months in that sign. Go ahead and look at the year 2016. Mars was in Sagittarius for half that year, or back in 2022 and early 20 this year, Mars was in Gemini for a long,
Forever.
long, long time. And Mars retrogrades in Leo and Virgo are frequent. They happen every 15 to 17 years, quite consistently. And therefore, those are, yeah, every 15 to 17 years, you're going to have Mars spending up to 6 months in Leo or Virgo, or, Cancer is also quite a frequent one. So it just, like, mathematically, if you look at a century or several centuries of Mars transits and gauge how much time Mars has spent in any of the signs, no matter what kind of, as long as you're using, let's say, a minimum of 79 years, then you'll see it's just, 79 being the closest Mars return that you get in a human lifetime. You'll see that it's just, mathematically straightforward that Mars spends a lot more time in Leo and Virgo and much less time in Capricorn, Aquarius, and Pisces.
Right.
Well,
I thought it was
it's
because Mars is basically at its closest point to
yes.
the sun. It's at its perihelion when it's in Cancer, Leo,
Well, it's not.
Virgo.
It's not that. It's this. I mean, Mars does have its own. What's the word I'm looking for? Copernicus,
Cycle
Galileo.
with the
No,
sun.
no, no. That ellipse. Mars has its own
Yeah.
ellipse cycle around the sun. So it's not like this even symmetrical, circle orbiting around the sun. It's a bit more skewered. Where at one point in the cycle it's closer to the sun, and in another part it's further. But Earth.
Aphilic versus perihelic.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But Earth also has this, where we have an elliptical orbit around the sun. And therefore, this is why the line for planet Earth is between January 4th and July 4th. And at January 4th, we're closest to the sun. And July 4th, we're furthest from the sun. And this is just true. This is, for instance, the reason why July and August both are months with 31 days, whereas February has 28 days. Because if the sun, geocentrically speaking, changes speed over the course of the year, and it moves slower in the July, August, and it moves faster in January, February, because of this proximity to the sun. And therefore, and then when we're observing planets from a geocentric perspective, our aphelion and perihelion just sort of like dictates how this all gets measured, especially as we're looking outward. And because Mars is so close to us, you just with this pattern that's a lot less symmetrical and even than, say, the Venus cycle, or even Jupiter or Saturn. So it's by virtue that it's the planet just beyond us from the sun, and because of the making of our pattern, it just sort of stands to reason that because the sun is moving, when the sun is in Capricorn and Aquarius, that's when you get your Venus retrogrades in Leo and Virgo. You know what I mean? Like because Mars is opposite. Whereas when you get your Mars retrogrades in Aquarius and Pisces, that's when the sun is in July and August. And so there's this whole.
We'll need an animated
You'll
video
need
on
an
that,
animated
Nick.
video. I'm doing my best to explain it merely verbally,
Yeah.
and I'm doing it.
I mean, I understand what you're saying, but I mean, just
Yeah,
but it's
it's
hard to track.
very visual, and
Yeah.
I've done my best just to try and give people a
Yeah, no,
visual picture.
you did a good job.
But that's
Um,
basically it. Yeah.
yeah. And then I wanted to address Crystal Martinez. She said, Patrick, are you not doing readings anymore? Tried to book on your site and I couldn't book. I'm so sorry that you've been having trouble with that. I am still doing consultations, so sorry about that. And I will see what's going on with my site. But
Oh dear.
this has been the never-ending problem for me, is my site. I had my URL stolen from me, my domain stolen. Not stolen, it just, I lost it. My original one, Patrick Watson Astrologer, and since then it's just been downhill. But anyway, I'll fix that, Crystal. So we also have somewhat of a time or rather somewhat of a date for another one of Musk's children that he had with Grimes.
Oh yes, the one born
Exodox Sidereal Musk.
Right. Someone mentioned, of course, that one of the child's middle names are sidereal.
Yeah.
But yeah, this child very likely is a red 4. I mean, again, it's another one of these hidden birth times. It seems to have been a newborn infant around November, December of 21.
Yeah, it's December 2021.
Yeah, so
We don't
that's
know
going into a red
exactly.
4. But if the child really was newborn then that would.
Yeah, we don't know the exact date. We just know the month. But interestingly, this at the same time that Exodox Sidereal Musk was being born, just the month prior, Elon Musk had donated his his sperm to a Neuralink employee, Siobhan Zilla. So he was not actually in a relationship with Siobhan Zillis, but they made an arrangement where he would biologically father her children. And so we don't actually know the date that these twins were born, but we do know that it was in November of 2021. And again, we can see that in the months leading up to these births, There would have been eclipses that occurred in Gemini and Sagittarius. Again, this is why I thought that Gemini was likely the fifth house because of the eclipse activity there. But instead, in terms of the fifth house and children, it seems like these children sort of came about as there was like this Sun, Mars, Mercury thing swinging through this sign.
Yeah, that is a time. The Sun Mars conjunction didn't happen in Scorpio, but it was close enough to Scorpio that you would get both planets in that sign. It's not the same thing as the conjunction I'm talking about this year.
Also,
that is the way it happens with the Mars cycle.
In November of 2021, that's also when we would have had the first lunar eclipse that occurred across this axis. At the end of that month, there would have been a lunar eclipse at the end of Taurus, so the sun would have been conjunct as Jupiter in the fifth house of his chart, given this time, 7:30 a.m. So that's another way we can kind of recontextualize these events. But so yeah, this is interesting as well, that Jupiter was probably moving over his Mars in this time frame as well. The ruler of the fifth house is another way you could potentially get some clue that there would be sort of more activities relating to children in his life. But we don't even know how many more children there would be. But based at least on the pattern, I would say, even irrespective of the houses in his chart, I would think that we probably expect that like a future Sun Venus in Gemini alignment, like we will have next spring into summer, or even a Venus retrograde in the future, that there could be potentially more Musk children around, especially since he seems intent on just spreading his seed as far as possible, seemingly.
Well, yeah, I mean, the thing I'm curious about with these kids is they're born in California, but we don't seem to know their birth dates. And California typically is an open state. Is it when they're underage? Is it a secret? Or
I don't know. I didn't try to get their times because I didn't even know their birth dates. I didn't have a way of even I wouldn't even have been able to make an application for it because I couldn't even get the date. You at least need the date to be able to file a request. So there was no way to do it. Otherwise this would have been probably not, someone else would have done this.
Yeah, we should be able to do it for the older kids, like the child that died at the age of 10 days, Nevada, and then
I think they were born in Canada.
No. Well, I see Orange County. I saw that you had Canada. Maybe I'm wrong. Again, you know more about him than I do. But when I looked at IMDb, it says Orange County.
I think he wanted them to be born in. I mean, it's possible. Maybe I didn't pay attention to that. I have Kingston, Canada as Nevada Musk's birthplace, so I don't know, but
okay. Well,
I'd have to check. It did this. I filled out this database a while ago.
Okay. And then, but what about the twins? They're born in Los Angeles, aren't they?
I think they might have been born in Los Angeles, so they might have that data potentially available. But
that would be even
well, it'd be nice to sort of fill out the family tree, I guess.
I think so.
Yeah,
I think so.
But
and especially Vivian, it'd be really, really
well, that would be interesting too to compare the twins, right? That would it's a very obvious divergence there. And some joker called the Astrology podcast is saying should have pulled a Mrs. Doubtfire, Patrick. Okay.
That guy again.
All right. So B Havens is saying in California, you can't get birth info unless you have reason to do so. Parent-child legal matter unless a person is deceased. That's not true. We're talking about California. You can
get birth certificates.
That is an open record state.
Yeah, we've done it before.
Obviously. Yeah, we've done it before. You can get it as a member of the public, but many other states, most of the states are closed, and you can't just walk in the door like that. But there are a few states where you can, and California is one of those, thankfully.
Wouldn't surprise me if that's if that's going to change too. I think the more astrology builds in its profile, eventually we're going to be on the radar of reactionaries, I think, who move to make this kind of.
Right.
I don't know. Maybe I'm paranoid, but I
Yeah.
think.
Although the data is out there to some degree, because there was this like infographic that some researcher had made. They were able to get birth times like from everywhere in the country, um, in order to make these graphics about determining like the average time of birth and the average time of day that children are born, the most common week, and or rather the most common
Hmm.
day and the least common day of the week. And they were able to make all these like statistical inferences about like birth times, and they got this um, from the Center for Disease Control, CDC,
Mhm.
had this data. And I tried to download it because I'm like,
Yeah,
seriously,
right.
you can really this, but I think it might be anonymized, which obviously doesn't help.
No,
Um,
no.
unless it also came perhaps with location data, and you just happen to be
And you
able
could
to kind of piece together, like,
retrofit it. Yeah.
yeah, they could like, oh, the only person who, there's only a few people who were born on this day in this place. This might be that time,
Yeah.
um, I always think it's kind of funny, when people talk about that, the idea that the government sort of crack down and like limit birth data, because it also kind of cuts against like the skeptical argument against astrology. Like, we can't even do. How can you really disprove astrology unless you have the appropriate data to be able to actually
Yeah.
test its claims in the way it does? If we don't even have that, then
Yeah.
you can't really
Well,
do
yeah,
good
sure.
astrology,
Sure.
anti-astrological research either.
Yeah. I mean, for my part, all the more reason to be focused on history and dead people and what have you, because they can't really take that from you. But yeah, it's something that concerns me. I don't, when it comes to the skeptics, I don't, they don't think we have anything. So they
Yeah,
wouldn't,
fair enough.
they wouldn't,
Yeah, they
oh,
wouldn't. They wouldn't.
really? We cut off research for your pseudoscience? Oh, sorry about that.
Right. Yeah.
It's not, how
So,
that's going to go.
right. So one thing I thought might be interesting to kind of look at is, since we have a more or less accurate time now, um, I've been curious to look at the Zodiacal releasing for Elon Musk.
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
would you like to take a look at
Yeah.
that?
Yeah. Do
All
you want to
right,
put
I
it
can
up?
share my
Yeah.
screen for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
Drum roll,
whoops.
please. Yeah, because this is
One
we
sec.
were
Let
saying
me.
last night when we were talking to Chris that now that we have a time, I'd really love to see this Adolfo releasing and how that all sort of fits. But I haven't had a chance to look.
Okay.
Okay.
So, Elon Musk was born with the lot of fortune in Virgo, and he was born with the lot of spirit in Taurus.
Mhm.
So we automatically know that the mutable signs, Virgo, Sagittarius, Pisces, and Gemini, are going to be the sort of peak periods of his activities, the central periods where these sort of narratives of his life are going to kind of center around. And so if we look at the way this has turned out, we can see that he started life off in a Taurus period when releasing from the lot of spirit. This is for matters of career and of his own kind of psychological state, his motivations for action. Then he actually gets to his major peak period, actually fairly early on,
Mhm.
May 17th, 1979 through 1999. What's interesting to consider here is in this time, he actually he came into some renown for like creating this game. He like created like a video game when he was a teen
Oh.
that did pretty well. And then it was also in the same time period that he founded Zip2 and was able to get venture capital to support his fledgling software. Of course, it was all rewritten after they bought it, but I mean, he had a fair amount of success. Pretty early on in life.
What year would that have been?
With the year of what?
Of the that he did the game.
The game. I don't actually have the date for that in my files, but I know he was just a teenager when he made this game.
Okay.
And so it's kind of interesting because from the context of this technique, it's saying that the kind of initiating phase or the peak period or the climax in some ways was this period from age 8 to about 28.
Mhm.
So then when he gets to the Cancer period, we know this should still be quite a good period in many ways, because the succeeding period relative to the lot of fortune should obviously be very busy, and with the potential for being highly sort of recognized and known due to the sun being there, with Mercury ruling the lot of fortune and the fortune 10th. And so, February 1st, 1999 through September 23rd, 2023, this does coincide with this, pretty impressive time of multiple business ventures that he started, and the sort of consistent rise in his stature and numerous myriad business accomplishments and ups and downs, all seem to be kind of piggybacking off of the kind of initial boost that he got sort of earlier in life from the success of his first company, Zip2, and getting that sold. So this really encompasses all of his different business activities in this time. Now, what's very interesting about the future is we can see that he's actually just 6 days away, just 6 days away from entering a new 19-year level 1 Leo period. And this is really interesting because Leo is cadent relative to fortune. It contains the South Node, which we already discussed as kind of a diminishing or minimizing sort of force. And it's opposed to his most malefic planet in his chart, because he was born during the day. The Mars is the contrary to sec malefic. So I have to say, the next 19 years overall, while there may be ups and downs within this time, this looks like it would probably be some of the most, at least compared to where he is now, a very difficult and challenging period, where he would see the kind of breakdown of things that he has tried to establish, and kind of a fall from grace. And we can already see part of this from where he is now, because on level 2, he's in a Taurus period, April 26, 2023 through till September 23rd, 2023. And Mars is actually in superior position to Taurus. So this is his most compromised sign in some ways, even though it's receiving some beneficial testimony from Jupiter. This is a sign that would be very challenged for him in his releasing sequence. And so that's where he currently is. So he's kind of going from one of his most challenged periods into a kind of even more significant version of a challenged period. So what do you make of?
No, I'm thinking exactly the same thing, that Leo period looks like trouble for him, because now we really are in his second house, and not not that eighth house that keeps funneling money to him, but his own sort of, and the South Node is like a vacuum sucking up everything that you've got in that sign, and so to my mind, it looks like trouble for sure.
Well, and knowing that the Mars retrograde in Aquarius of 2018 was when the SEC kind of came after him, and when he was experiencing this period of greater troubles in his life, makes me think that on a kind of on the level of Zodiac releasing, this sort of suggests that he would probably be under a heightened scrutiny from various powers, especially when he reaches the Aquarius periods on level 2 in 2032 through 2034, and then even more significantly at the loosing of the bond, January 2041 through June 2042. I would think that would be when Mars sort of has its greatest authority, or greatest period of being in control, and when he would probably make his sort of greatest mistakes, or when he would be kind of ensnared by, you'd be like in the target to the crosshairs of these sort of opposing powers. It would be problematic to him. So I think that really it's hard to see that he has many better days after this. Now it's interesting though, because if he does get past that Leo period, granted he'll be pretty old, but in June of 2042, that's when he comes into a much more beneficial looking peak period that kind of harkens back to this original sort of Wunderkind era of his teenage years and 20s. So
Yeah,
I don't know if that's like
maybe,
when he finally reaches his point of rehabilitation.
or when he runs for president.
Oh God. Um, yeah, but I
Yeah,
gotta say, it doesn't look great
yeah.
for him
I
in his
mean,
nuclear
his
period.
level 2 period, when he was in the Cancer period, his level 2 Aquarius period, the second one was in August of
Oh my
2018.
gosh.
You know,
Oh my God. Yeah. Wow.
so like
So
while that Mars retrograde was happening in Aquarius, he was actually in the level 2
in the
Aquarius,
Aquarius period. Oh my
and that's when
God.
he had
Wow.
that SEC stuff going on, right? So
Shit.
yeah,
Oh, dang.
yeah.
I didn't even notice
Yeah,
that.
you're
Wow.
welcome.
Good
Yeah, thank
catch.
you. Um,
Um,
so
wow.
yeah, I think you're reading this, pretty, and we have precedents, when you're looking ahead and anticipating that next Aquarius second level being
Right.
tough. Well, the proof is in the pudding. Look at what that was for him.
Right. You know, it's really interesting to see that this loosening of the bond occurred June 1st, 2016 through August 20th, 2018,
Yeah,
because there's definitely been a shift in Elon Musk's
sure.
character. Because, if we think back just to a couple of years ago, I don't know exactly when the shift happened, but he went from kind of being more like or like sort of more neutral
Very neutral.
or
I always thought,
like
yeah,
much more kind of he didn't seem like I don't know what happened, but at some point he kind of became, I guess, sort of red pilled. He kind of
yeah,
he started he kind of yeah, he kind of had a bit of a right wing shift at some
yeah,
point where prior to a certain point in time, maybe around the 2016 election, he kind of switched from being this more neutral and somewhat kind of even admired, I'd say, sort of business person, someone who is seen as being really um, kind of nobly or earnestly pursuing things like clean energy
yep,
and electric cars and things like that, to kind of becoming this more uh, polarizing or controversial figure. And it's hard to see exactly when that happened, but we know that 2018 was definitely when things started seeming like publicly kind of off the rails. But I wonder if, on a personal level, this loosening the bond to Capricorn, which paradigmatically or archetypally shows a movement from light to darkness, reflects that similar shift in his own personality from being kind of more like heroic, sciencey, neutral, sort of admired business person to being kind of this more like political and kind of memeified and
hmm
right wing
yeah,
kind of version of himself. And so it's interesting to see that this loosening of the bond of Capricorn. Anyone looking at this using this technique might have been able to tell that, okay, after 2016 we get kind of a different kind of person, a different kind of Elon, and that definitely seems to track with what we've seen. Again, it's hard to know exactly when that shift might have happened, but according to this technique, it seems to have originated on June 1st, 2016.
yeah, yeah. Um,
What do you think of that?
Yeah, no, I think that's absolutely spot on. I mean, 2016 shows. I think, um, the 2016 was a year that a lot of people got red pilled clearly, and then a lot of people also sort of went the other way as well. Like there was some kind of exchange happening at the time, obviously centering largely around the impending election of 45. Um, but yeah, I think that period in 20, it is a discernible shift. If you asked me, in the year 2010 or whatever, what I thought of Musk, I'm like, well, at least he's a billionaire doing things for the world. That probably would have been
Yeah,
that would have been
I
something I
had a
would say.
more,
Number
yeah, I
one,
had a
like I
more.
said, I PayPal was making my life possible. And number two, Tesla. Oh, really? Cars that don't need fuel. That sounds like a really good idea.
Yeah,
Yeah, I would have been.
I kind of
Yeah,
at one point I saw him as more of kind of like a almost Tony Stark like
sure.
figure, and now he just seems he's a bit more like kind of right. He gives the right wing podcaster vibes.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, I want to respond to comments our friend Chris Brennan has made here. So he's saying Gemini also contained the ruler of spirit. That's a good observation. He also said, Holy Shnikes, though, is about to enter his most positive and negative general period, also a brand new angular triad. So one of the reasons that I think Chris is mentioning that is because of the square that Jupiter is making to the new sign that he's entering. So he's
Right.
entering this Leo period in 6 days, and we can see it's not just making this opposition to Mars, but also this square to Jupiter. Now, one thing to keep in mind, though, about this particular square is it's an inferior square. So Jupiter is not in as good of a position to impart
No.
its beneficence to the sign of Leo as it would be if he were born with, say, Jupiter in Taurus.
Yeah.
So Jupiter is not quite as strong in this position relative to Leo, and Mars comparatively is in a more stronger position to affect the sort of overall outcomes of the time.
But it is in an
And it's
angle.
not
But
hard
it is
to,
on an angle.
but it is an
Yeah.
angle. So yeah, I mean, I would think
A fortune
that
angle, to be clear, just so people know. Yeah,
right,
it's on a fortune
right.
angle, so it is.
It's a a sign based angularity to that
The
sign.
natal
I
fortune,
think
the spirit.
well, a lot of fortunes in Virgo.
Yeah, I
so
that's what
Leo's
I
fine.
meant
Okay,
angular
gotcha.
to the lot of spirit. Sorry, I didn't mean to confuse you.
Gotcha. I see what you mean. So I think what's probably what makes the most sense and what we can almost already sort of see is that while there's a lot of people who are very kind of upset and kind of grossed out or bewildered by this version of Elon Musk, he still has a
More,
he has a
he's
throng of
more
stands
ways
as
to
well.
fall. Yeah. No, he definitely.
Yeah, he's got some devoted followers out there.
Yeah.
They love their daddy Musk, and it's a little gross, but they do exist. He will have his supporters. Regardless of the strong headwinds that he'll be facing from Mars.
Yeah.
So
It's just
it will be a bit of a mixed bag.
This-
It won't be uniformly awful.
This whole thing with Twitter has just been such a excuse my French, shit show. It's but comically so. I mean, during the Trump presidency, of course, Trump was the great comic of Twitter. The world was coming apart, and he was, this atrocious person occupying an incredibly powerful position. But it was, kind of comical at the same time. I mean, Trump on Twitter was just like one knee slapper after another, conducted through the fear of what would happen next. But it was still,
it was an odd combination of being terrifying and hilarious.
Like sort of trench humor or gallows humor, like the kind of joke you make just before they chop your head off, which is obviously all the funnier. But yeah, it was funny. It was objectively funny, as terrifying as it all was. And then off went 45, and Musk's whole thing about free speech, worrying about sort of censorship and not realizing, no, it's the advertisers who censor. If advertisers were fine with everyone being racist and transphobic, then that's that. It's that's what dictates things, and he's trying to fight the zeitgeist, which I think is peculiar. I don't know if I'm making sense.
No, I think that's really interesting, especially when you consider that he was born like a couple of days or so away from. I've spoken about this before, I think, on here about how Julian Assange, the founder of WikiLeaks, was born a couple of days away from Elon Musk, and he's a guy who started a whole website which is explicitly about freedom of speech,
right.
and bringing disclosure to things which are supposed to be private. Also, really interesting is in that same week that they were both born, that was when the Supreme Court gave the victory to the New York Times for publishing the Pentagon Papers.
Right.
So you can see that the ethos of that week in that June 1971 was about this kind of
getting the truth,
triumph,
the truth,
getting freedom of speech no matter what, like freedom of speech no matter what. And I believe this is also when Mercury would have been making a heliacal rising, which makes it all that much more important that Mercury is rising even according to the Earth's turn at 7:30 a.m. And really elevating that whole principle of communication. So in some ways it makes sense that he took over a site like Twitter, which is precisely about that. But we also know Mercury rules the 12th house in this chart, so it's also like giving voice to like you know,
And he's got a moon.
the enemies
Yeah,
of society.
he's got a moon Mercury mutual reception. And Twitter is very moon Mercury. Like, yes, but it's all like driven by like emotion and like
Right.
it's yeah, it's not merely.
He's talked about how he wanted to he thought that Twitter kind of served the function of like the town square,
Mhm.
the forum, and I thought that was really interesting in light of what his time actually is. Chris again has a great take here. He said he figured out the financial thing. It may have to do with the place of acquisition from Valens is strikingly well placed due to the mutual reception. So yeah, this is another interesting thing that Valens, the originator of this technique, Zadaka releasing, mentions, is that when you look at the lot of fortune, you want to look at the sign that is the 11th place from fortune, which he actually calls the place of acquisition. And he singles it out for being a place that is associated with financial gain. And so that is quite interesting that the mutual reception that exists between the first and third houses from the perspective of the lots is also happening across the lot of fortune to the place of acquisition. And so having that kind of mutual reception between those rulers involved in those specific places would actually have there would be a way that you could actually use that to be able to make a more sort of, I guess, straightforward way of being able to potentially interpret that he would do well for money. But that's interesting, because even if you don't take the lots into account, I think that we can still see that what his chart sort of indicates on a more sort of default basis is that there would be difficulties in this area as well.
Yeah, for sure. All right. Yeah, there's some interesting comments here. Geocosmic Valentine says, a bit like Chaplin, Hitler, born 4/16 and 4/19 of the same year. It's actually, Hitler's birthday was April 20th. They're 4 days apart in 1889. I've done long ago, I did a video about Chaplin and Hitler. I think I've spoken about their time twins qualities here on the live stream, but I'd be happy to go over that sometime, because that was one of my first big Venus examples, was studying the lives of Chaplin and Hitler, because they're both born 4 days apart. They're born during the red 1 Venus interval with the Venus retrograde in Taurus. And you can look at both their timelines, and it's amazing how everything in their lives related to the red 1 interval. In 1913, Chaplin was invited to move to Hollywood during the red 1 interval, and Hitler moved from Austria to Germany. So obviously that's an important event, not just in the life of Hitler, but really in the history of the world. And then, Hitler even wound up taking his own life in 1945 during the red 1 Venus interval, at the same time that Chaplin was going through this devastating paternity lawsuit that was very public, very embarrassing, and actually unfair. Like, a blood test proved that Chaplin wasn't the birth father, and yet the court still held him responsible for the child. So it was kind of, anyway, I could go on and on, but there's some really interesting stuff when you study their lives. And that's what makes time twins really worthwhile studying. And with that in mind, Trabrex said, let's see the chart of Julian Assange. I think
I can bring that up right now.
Yeah, I think doing a proper, this is the thing, when I want to talk about a chart, I really want to study the whole life, which I obviously haven't done with Musk or Assange. I have your layman's knowledge of their lives. I certainly have looked at their charts. But a really worthwhile study involves going through everything. And it's we just don't know. Assange has spent more than a decade sort of locked away here and there. And we don't know much about his inner world since, all that's been happening.
Right.
But yeah, go ahead and show us these charts.
Oh, I was just going to look at the exact time of the New York Times case.
What, in 1971?
Yeah.
Oh, I think I have. Okay.
1971, June 26th.
Right.
Okay,
So 2 days before Elon.
So 2 days before Elon Musk, and about a week before Julian Assange. So we can see they have, you know, a lot of like similar placements. Obviously, there are millions of people probably born, you know, in the space of these days. But I think it's just interesting that these are just two sort of contemporary examples of people who have kind of similar signatures in the sky, and have, you know, some oddly parallel kinds of motivations, you know, in the major things that they've done in the public eye, you
Mhm.
know, relating to you know, at least in some way purporting to uphold the principle of free speech. And that is so interesting too, that they were born in the aftermath of this decision, that of the Supreme Court, which basically gave, you know, the victory to the New York Times for publishing the
Pentagon Papers,
the
yeah.
Pentagon Papers.
Which
And what's so
they had
interesting,
only
oh, go ahead.
started doing a couple of weeks earlier. It wasn't like it that this all happened very fast. Like even the very first publication of the Pentagon Papers is in June of 71. It's so funny. It's the Sunday morning after Nixon's daughter was married at the White House. So they had this really, I have the chart somewhere in my database. They had this really sort of like extravagant wedding at the White House. Nixon's daughter, you know, being married there and everything. And then the next morning, Sunday morning, Nixon opens up the New York Times over breakfast and sees the Pentagon Papers for the first time. And that's really sort of like, I mean, that's directly related ultimately to Watergate. You know, it's part of what makes him so paranoid. And the first publication of yeah, I should have it here somewhere. Why don't I have it here? I should have it here. Anyway, it's there in June. I see here the June 14th, 71, the first time he's talking about it. Yeah, I think it was June 13th, 71 that the Pentagon Papers were published, because I have the White House tape of him talking about it the next day with Alexander Haig. So yeah, it was only, you know, Mars was already slowing down to its retrograde station by the time it came out. And the Supreme Court decision is just that much closer to the station and making everything happen.
So one of the sort of connecting themes I can see through this whole idea is the fact that one of the things that stood out to me is the fact that Elon Musk's sun is square Uranus, as is Julian Assange's sun. And, you know, the archetypal sort of combination of the sun and Uranus, you know, is going to be people who individuate themselves through the defiance of established orders, or sort of championing in some ways the idea of freedom and independence, even if that's sort of unbound from social convention, or the status quo. And what's so interesting about this is that this actually connects to the Pentagon Papers in an even deeper way. Here's the chart of Daniel Ellsberg, the
Yeah,
whistleblower, the
Sun
leaker
Uranus.
of the
Yeah,
Pentagon
yeah.
Papers. He's born with Sun Uranus conjunction, and then we look at someone like Chelsea Manning, you know, who leaked
Yeah.
the military videos to Julian Assange to publish them on WikiLeaks, and they were born with the Sun conjunct Uranus in Sagittarius.
Yeah.
You know, so we see this kind of theme of you know, whistleblowers or leakers, you know, coming from people who were born with these strong sort of Uranus contacts between the Sun and Uranus. So I think it's really interesting to see how these same sort of themes, you know, kind of come together with these recurring planetary combinations in the natal charts.
For sure. The other thing is, over the course of that Mars retrograde in Aquarius, what would happen after the Pentagon Papers were allowed to be published? The next thing, of course, is Nixon wants J. Edgar Hoover to investigate what's his name? The guy you were just talking about, Ellsberg. He wants J. Edgar Hoover to investigate Ellsberg, and Hoover refuses. So Nixon winds up creating his own gang of investigators, the plumbers, to break into Daniel Ellsberg's psychiatrist's office to get access to the files so they can get dirt on Daniel Ellsberg. And the guy on Nixon's staff who authorizes this break-in, his name is Egil Bud Crow. He goes by the name Bud Crow. You see his name written as Egil Crow. And Egil Crow was born August 3rd, 1939, with Mars retrograde in Capricorn, just coming out of that retrograde. And he's the one that gets the burglars, and they go and it's these same burglars who 9 months later, during the Venus retrograde in 1972, will break into the office at Watergate and trigger that whole thing. So you can see the dominoes sort of falling from there with that Mars retrograde in Aquarius, and what it sort of leads to the following year with Watergate and everything.
Right. Yeah, I was just looking at what was going on during the Mars retrograde for Julian Assange. It looks like it was just kind of happening in the middle of these, various attempts to try to extradite him.
I imagine someday someone's going to write like a book about Assange that's well researched, that has like, inside details of the years he spent inside, what was it? The Ecuadorian embassy or something like that. It was a Latin American embassy. I think it was the Ecuadorian embassy. And everything else that, someday we're going to know, and we'll be able to sort of place all this. But this is the other hazard of doing contemporary studies, is we don't have all the details until later,
B Havens says charts, for some reason the charts are looking smaller on the shared screen than usual. The reason is because I'm the one sharing, and my main screen is like a really wide screen, so you're probably seeing the bars.
Yeah, it might be better if I share the charts.
I actually have a second monitor to my left here, which is just a square. So it might look better if I share it on that.
No, I was thinking the same thing. I'm glad someone mentioned that.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Yeah, I'll keep that in mind.
All right.
I just like having, I'm almost thinking of getting a third monitor here. Because I honestly need one where like I have like an animated chart wheel, almost like a clock, of like the planets on one screen, my like social media is on my other one over here, and then whatever I'm sort of working on here. I've just needed more real estate with my screens. So
I'd like to have this set up. I'm trying to do video editing, which is really, I'm just on my laptop. I only use my laptop.
Oh my gosh, I can't even.
Yeah, I know.
I can't imagine. I'm like running out of space even with this massive screen in front of me and the one on the left here. So yeah, definitely recommend it. Really, really, it's quite nice having more screen space.
Yeah, well, since coming back to Vancouver from South Africa, I've kind of been starting over possession wise. I couldn't move. I had to get a new camera, new mic, and everything. I didn't just bring the ones I had in South Africa over. So yeah, just as well I didn't accumulate too much stuff there. And but now that I'm here, I'm definitely going to build on what I have.
I just realized, one of the things I thought was really interesting about the Mercury retrograde is, the singer Dua Lipa, she found out what her birth time actually was. Like she thought she had a different, and I thought that was interesting. And I just realized that we kind of have something similar going on here with Elon Musk's chart for what's going on sort of currently. Do you want to share it instead, since
Dua Lipa?
Oh, no. Elon Musk's current transits.
Yeah.
I could share it too. I can just share it on my smaller screen so that it's easier for everyone to see.
Try.
Yeah, I'll try. I'll try.
I don't mind putting it up.
1 sec. Let me get it over here. Okay, so I'm going to try sharing my smaller screen and see if it looks better.
Huh? You do realize?
Okay, do you see it?
Just a moment. We just have a really peculiar comment from Roy Lovins. I have no idea what they're trying to tell me.
You do realize what? The opposite. I don't understand.
Don't know who you're talking about.
So, I'm not sure.
Say what you mean, Roy Lovins. We're it's easier to read a horoscope than it is to interpret whatever it is you're trying to say.
We'll ignore that.
Yeah.
All right. Can you see the screen?
Yeah, it's nice now. This is good.
What? I don't. Okay, yeah, I'm ignoring that guy. You don't understand what they're going on about. All right. Okay. All right. So it looks better.
What the hell is this person talking about?
I don't know. Yeah, just ignore it. It's it's a troll. Oh, yeah, no more attention. Okay. Can you see the chart all right?
It's great. Okay. Much better.
All right. Okay, good. Because all right, so we basically got the we got confirmation. When was this biography actually published?
It's very, very recent.
Like literally like yesterday or something.
I can look up on Amazon here.
So is Elon Musk 52 now?
Yeah. Yeah. It was
too.
published
So
September 12th, so 5 days ago. The publication date on Amazon is September 12th.
okay.
Yeah.
Obviously, the exact time doesn't matter. I'm just looking at the general trend.
Yeah, you know.
So look at this. The ruler of the ascendant is the moon in Virgo, and Mercury is stationing retrograde, or stationing direct rather, directly on his moon, the ruler of his first house. And so not only does he get this text, this document about his whole life, written up and released to the public, but then we also get this very crucial document about his son. This is very, very similar to what we saw with Dua Lipa, that Mercury went retrograde over her ascendant ruler in the fourth house, and she discovered this, fact about herself that sort of changed her perception of her history.
Mhm.
And in this case, we're kind of seeing a similar type of thing with Mercury stationing retrograde on the ascendant ruler. So I guess one general interpretive principle we might be able to extract from this is that, if you have Mercury station retrograde on the planet that represents you in your natal chart, then you're going to find something out about yourself, or that there'll be something about yourself which is somehow made public, and documents or something which is sort of written about you, or other sorts of information that is available at that point, or something like that.
Indeed.
So that, yeah, I just thought that was another kind of interesting little tidbit.
Fair enough.
Sorry, I'm just reading that comment, still trying to make sense
I
of what
don't know,
saying,
like
but
Roy Levins, are you talking to someone else and accidentally texting us? Because you seem to be in your own conversation.
Maybe it's Elon.
Bald. See, at first I thought he was saying someone whose buttocks is shaved, but now it's just like the phrasing is so awkward.
It's just mad
like
libs.
someone that Roy doesn't like, who also has a shaved or waxed buttock, but then I'm realizing, no, he's accusing someone of being like follically challenged and a sodomizer. But it just working that part out of his text took me 10 minutes.
Anyway. So
on another note, speaking of disgraced celebrities, this is just an aside. There's the strike going on, the writers' strike, and all this stuff happening with Hollywood, and Drew Barrymore. Drew Barrymore has gotten herself into hot water. Drew Barrymore, she's got Saturn transiting her sun right now, and she didn't pull out a ukulele.
Oh, it's the scab transit.
It's the scab. Well, she didn't pull out a ukulele. Thankfully, because that seems to be the thing to do these days.
I didn't actually watch the video, for full disclosure, but I'm aware that she
deleted it soon. I just saw a screenshot of it, but she cried and said she was sorry for almost being a scab. She has backtracked, so she's a near.
I'm like, that's not what she should be sorry for.
Yeah, she has. Well, she posted a tearful apology, and then that got taken down, and people, of course, are ripping on that. I mean, you're just gonna have to walk through the hall of shame.
Right.
But it does seem that she's backtracked on it. But I wanted to point out Saturn's on her Pisces sun. She's someone whose life and career, I used to study it. She kind of disappeared from my view for a long time, but it is interesting that being a February.
I thought it was really interesting that all of the men that she ended up being involved with had Sun conjunct Neptune. I thought that was really interesting.
Yeah. I talked about that at one point. I forget where.
Yeah, it was one of your Star Story articles.
Okay, yeah. Why don't I pull up her? I do have a Drew Barrymore file. Why don't we just pull that up?
Yeah, the scab transit. Yeah, Saturn conjunct the sun. That's not how I had my Saturn sun conjunction, though. I didn't do anything quite like that. But I don't really know much about
Yeah, actually, funny
her
enough,
chart, so this will be interesting.
one of Drew's husbands, Tom Green, I think her second husband, he was born in July of 71. He's got the Mars retrograde.
Oh, okay, interesting.
Where is she now? There's Drew. Okay. So yeah, this is Drew and Drew's transits. So yeah, you can see like her progressed Mars recently went into Pisces, and now Saturn has been going back and forth on that. And she turned 48, so she's in a first house perfection year, right? Am I doing the math right? Yeah.
85,
Yeah.
95, 2005, 2015, 23.
Am I not?
She's 48. Yeah, I think she's 48.
This is her last birthday. You can see there's a Venus synodic return, but also a Jupiter synodic return. Which
and Mars stationing on,
right, exactly,
her
on her ascendant as she begins the first house perfection year. Yeah.
So she was kind of being set up then for this kind of more martial year, but it's interesting that it didn't really kind of materialize until now when Saturn sort of comes into a 10th house.
I think, again, that the Mercury retrograde, the Lord of the Year, the retrograde Virgo,
gestation,
and that sort of, and sure enough, like she said, she was going to break the strike, and then she's backtracked. So it's sort of classic Venus retrograde stuff.
Mercury
retrograde stuff.
Yeah.
And then with regard to the men in her life, this is Tom Green, Sun Neptune trine. You can see that Mars retrograde there, but I think it was Justin Long who she dated for a while. Sun Neptune opposition. Fabrizio
I must have
Moretti,
misremembered the nature of the
Sun Neptune opposition, and I think also her father had a Sun Neptune. I wrote this thing ages ago. This is her father. No, half brother. Where's her father? He's not, that's right. He's in the 30s. He was old. John Drew. He's a red 3, like her buddy Cameron Diaz. No, okay, it's a Sun Neptune there. It's a Gemini thing. Yeah, square, I forget what it was. I wrote it so long ago, but there was something interesting going on there at the time.
That's interesting too, because I think doesn't Ashton Kutcher also have Gemini rising, and he's also,
oh god, he's
also,
I mean, Mila Kunis was born August 14th, 1983. She's a red 5, so you can see like instantly she's in that red 5 return. She's exactly 15 years younger than me to the day. And Ashton, somewhere I have that 70s show. Let's see here. I have there we are. Okay, so once again, this is my.
Although we also don't know that the birth time for Ashton Kutcher is necessarily.
That's right. I know he's a twin.
Correct.
Yeah, I know he's a twin.
That's right.
And his twin brother, I think, has some kind of neurological situation. I forget what it is. But
so it may not. So he may not necessarily have Gemini rising. I kind of remember that, but looking at it now, it's a very
we don't know for sure, but it is possible. But anyway, that's what's going on for him. Whatever the reality of his time of birth is. Whoops, where am I? All right. I got to wrap it up. I've got clients coming.
You got to go. Okay.
But this has been a good one.
Yeah. I mean, even though I got Elon Musk's, even though I got the rectification wrong, I still feel like I learned something from it. And more than anything else, I'm just glad that we, actually have something approximating, a real time. I presume it came from his mother. I looked at the source notes for that chapter in the biography, and it lists, interviews with the family. And, Mae Musk has mentioned the time many times, or rather, she mentioned the birth story many times. but without quite enough detail to be able to suss out the time. But I'm, thankfully, Isaacson was able to to get that for us. So
Yeah.
thank you
And
to the biographer.
well, he's really, really good. All his books. I mean, he wrote the definitive biography of Steve Jobs, of course, but
Right.
pretty much one of the better books about Einstein. Very good book about Da Vinci. One of my favorite books that he wrote is a combined biography. What's it called? The Six Wise Men or the Wise Men? About these different sort of government bureaucrats who were really essential in the Second World War. It's very good. But yeah, he's on CNN all the time as a sort of, he's one of the few, he's sort of, he's often on with Christiane Amanpour, which is, in my opinion, the only 1 hour that's remotely useful on CNN. I mean, that has any value. He's very, very good. So yeah, I'm looking forward to reading that book. I'm grateful not only that we have a birth time, but I'm grateful that you put in the work to study his biography. I can see here, like I said, I really haven't been looking at him much astrologically. I was always aware of his birthday, that he had that Mars station, but I can see now with all these kids, especially, that there really is a really interesting story that's worth investigating here. I would love to be able to get, birthdays, if not times, for his kids.
Right.
Look into, certainly the 3 older ones, and see what we can do there. I think it would be worth trying.
Yeah.
Well, fantastic. Thank you everyone for tuning in. And who are you, Watson?
I'm an astrologer. I'm Patrick Watson. You can book services with me once my site's fixed. Apparently, I mean, it should be. I have had people sign up still, but yeah, I'm available for consultations and services at my website at patrickwatsonAstrology.com. And also don't forget to check out my new Chrome extension I released on the Chrome web store, Astroglyph, which helps you use astrological symbols wherever you want. It's $5. Try it out. See if you're able to use it. Get some use out of it.
Sweet.
So that's me.
Thank you. And I am Nick Dagan Best. You can find me at nickdaganbestastrologer.com. Also available for consultations and tutoring and rectification and electionals and all kinds of wonderful astrological services that I offer. So yeah, keep us in mind. We're both working astrologers, supporting families, contributing to the general good of society, and we're worth supporting. Isn't that right?
Well, sure. yeah, I guess.
Okay. Well, thanks for the vote of confidence there, Watson.
Sorry.
One last. Chelsea Collins says she also has a horrid astrologer on staff. Such an embarrassment when said astrologer interviewed Neil deGrasse Tyson. Was that on the Drew Barrymore show? Is that who you're talking about, Chelsea? If that's true, I'm going to have to watch that. I know that Drew is kind of astrology friendly. I've seen that over the course of the years.
Just not strike friendly.
Yeah, I think, look, she's, I'm not gonna. I mean, it's a really stupid move on her part, but I think she's, just too.
I imagine
too sheltered to know that she's making a mistake. Anyway, I don't know.
She knows now.
Yeah, exactly.
Now.
Yeah. It's not up to me to defend her, but
right.
I think she just has no clue. I think she went into this dumb. She's good at being Drew Barrymore. She's not necessarily good at sort of, being on top of the
holding the line.
Yeah, exactly. But anyway, good luck to her. I mean, I'm glad she's sort of, backtracked and she should be given a chance to at least she didn't move forward. At least she's someone who can course correct, unlike say Bill Maher, who I'm sure will not.
Right.
Who I'm sure will not. So
yeah,
someone screws up and they get they get shamed, and then they have to move on with life, and you have to enable that as well. So yeah, Chelsea Collins is saying yes, she had a whole segment. He made her look like a complete idiot. Okay, well, Drew, if you want some better astrologers to talk to Neil deGrasse Tyson, I can think of a few, 2 of whom are staring you right now. So look us up, Drew, if you're watching. See, that's the thing. We can have our little live stream and we're not breaking any strikes. We haven't had anyone write anything for us. So see, Drew, you should come on our show. You should be our third astrologer on our live stream.
Oh God.
Help us boost the numbers. I'm just kidding. All right. Well, we've already said goodbye. Thank you for putting up with that last bit of foolishness, folks. This has been a really interesting live stream. I'm glad we're back and we're, at full strength. And yeah, great job, Watson. Thank you.
Oh,
Thank you so
thanks.
much.
You too.
All right. So
Thank you, guys.
I will be live streaming tomorrow, 1 p.m. during having them back again to sort of wrap up the conversation we've had going for the past couple of months on my solo live stream. So yeah, tune in for that. It's an hour earlier tomorrow with Sam. And Patrick and I will be back next week because we know Mercury's not going retrograde, and nothing else should foul up our plans from here on. So fantastic. All right. Have yourself a great week, and we'll see you next weekend.